And then we are going to go into what is lobbying and why it's important, specifically for youth and just in general, and specifically right now, why it's important right now. And then we're going to do lobbying 101, get into it. How do we do it, especially as youth, and how do we do that? And then we're looking at 3 different bills. One of them is Representative Tracy Burnett's bill, so that's exciting. And then we're going to put you guys in breakout groups. So we're having 2 breakout groups. One of them is going to be learning more about story of self and how you use that and how to create that. And then the other one is going to be just practicing for being in a meeting, what that looks like and just all that. And then we're going to do a recap and other ways to get involved. And then again, we're going to do a 30-minute question session. So if you have any questions, you can stay on for that. All of our organizers will be staying on that can. So I'm going to pass it to Charlia, who's going to do our latest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Let me just change my screen orientation so I can read. Alrighty. So this is our land acknowledgement. 350 Colorado honors and acknowledges that all residents of Colorado exist on the traditional and unceded territories of the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Pueblo, Shoshone, Ute, Comanche, Kiowa, and Navajo nations. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future, and to all those who have stewarded the land and water for generations. May this acknowledgement express our deep commitment to growing and deepening relationships with the vibrant Indigenous communities who continue to thrive and uphold their sacred relation to this land.
And then Chelsea can go.
Thank you, Charlia. Hello, everybody. My name is Chelsea Alexander. I am the Movement Building and Volunteer Director with 350 Colorado. And I have the total privilege of working with so many amazing youth leaders and organizers. But I won't wax on. I'm going to just share very briefly about understanding the climate crisis. You could spend a lot of time trying to explain this, but here are just some key points to take away. And I encourage you to continue that education. As is always that a part of grassroots organizing is continued education. So 350 means climate safety, and that number really is connected to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, CO2. 350 parts per million is what scientists deemed as the safe upper limit. And today we are at about 419 parts per million and rising about 2 to 3 annually with the current emissions that come out of our factories, our transportation, our food systems, our own lifestyles. It's not too late to turn that number around though. That is really important to know. We can still steer back underneath 350 and have a secure, livable future and climate. 1.5 degrees Celsius is also a kind of an upper threshold limit that scientists have identified as we shouldn't probably go past this as a global temperature. Right now we're at about 0.8. So we're at a good spot. And again, we still have the opportunity to keep that temperature down, not let our planet heat to the point that we disrupt its natural systems and cause a slew of other related interlinked problems to happen. And speaking of interlinked, it's really important to ground down in climate crisis or in the climate movement and know that climate change disproportionately impacts many different people. And if we do not work to center their voices and make sure their experiences are heard, we are not doing full justice to this type of work because it is climate organizing and it is climate justice as well. So it's really important that, again, we work with everybody in our communities and uplift those that need their voices to be heard because they've been disregarded. And we see that time and time and again in different examples of environmental racism. So thank you, Tessa, reading my mind. Just as I wrap up here, these are ways that I would imagine a lot of us have seen climate change in Colorado, and we're seeing these things intensify. The Marshall fires, unfortunately, are a pretty clear indication of accumulating factors like really dry summers and delayed snowfall and higher windstorms, leading to events that don't happen as often as they used to. So we send out love and safety to everybody here as these things happen to us, because they are going to, as best as we try to mitigate them. But we can fight for all these things and more here in Colorado. And yeah. With that, I will pass it and give a very warm introduction to Representative Tracy Burnett. It is so wonderful to have you here. We would love to hear your expertise and your insight about why this is important, lobbying, speaking to our legislators, and any other tips and tricks you have to add. You on mute? I think you're on mute, Tracy.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still on mute, Tracy. So sorry.
Okay, no, that's my bad. Can I be back? I don't want to look at my slide. I'd rather look at people. Thank you. Yeah. So I think sometimes you might think, well, does my voice really matter? And I'd have to say, I firmly believe that change happens at the grassroots, the community, the state level, national level, and beyond. And so your voice does matter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lobbying, and then a little bit about my, some of my bills, specifically HB 1249. Well, first of all, the Marshall Fire is my district, and it's the third time that I've been involved in climate-related disaster reliefs. It's Hurricane Sandy back in New York City. I was going to run the marathon and I ended up doing relief work there. Then the floods that hit Boulder County in 2013. One of my friends nearly died in that. And then the Marshall Fire. So the climate crisis is here. And I think when we're down at the state capitol, you're surrounded by other colleagues and lobbyists who, there's lobbyists of all kinds, like 350 has a lobbyist, have all these different people, but there's nothing like hearing from what I call real people. I get a lot of data and facts and this kind of stuff, but when you talk about lobbying, what is so important is the stories that you tell. And I'll tell you too, youth have you're especially powerful at the state capitol. There's nothing like sitting in committee and then hearing and having kids come in, kids, high school kids or older, but young people coming in and telling their stories. What you do specifically is you are our future. There's nothing like sitting in committee looking at you and saying, well, I don't care about climate change. That's not going to affect me. I'm going to be dead by then. It's you guys. So this is really, really important. When you lobby, don't give data and facts, give stories, because those are the things that are going to stay with me. I still remember a plastics bill last year that was passed. It had to do with reducing plastic, the plastic bags that we all use, that's going away. I still remember one person saying, the average person eats a credit card's worth of plastic every year. I mean, my gosh, okay, that stuff sticks with you, but also those stories. So just keep those stories in mind. And I can't tell you enough, you are the future generation, and remind them that it's our responsibility as legislators to make sure that the world is still safe and viable and sustainable for you, okay? So, and let me give you a little story on that. Okay, one of my bills that I passed last year, this is the influence of one person, and it's actually my daughter. She was telling me about how we can use greener construction materials. She's an architect. In fact, she was still in school at the time. And so she told me about this thing called embodied carbon. It's a way to assess how we can use greener construction materials. Well, guess what? I got interested in that, and I signed a bill I got a bill passed last year, House Bill 1303. It's Buy Clean Colorado. Didn't get a lot of action here, or notice in Colorado, but I spoke at New York Climate Week. And since then, I've had legislators around the US, and also there's one from Canada that are calling me and asking me. I'm going to be on TV tonight talking about my bill. It's finally getting back here. But this, and now the federal government is doing the same thing. This is the impact of one youth making a difference all the way around the country and the world. So never discount your voice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple other bills because I know you care about these things and climate change. This is my thing. This is the reason why I ran for office, because I not only passed a bill last year that uses greener construction materials, but I really have focused on the building sector, because buildings, you think about greening up buildings and things like electric vehicles, making sure that your new house or your building is wired for a new, electric vehicle, because, in like 10 years, it's going to be hard to buy anything but an electric vehicle. So these are the kinds of things I'm working on. And also weaning ourselves off of fracked gas we use to heat our homes and to heat our food and to heat our water. So those are a lot of the bills that I've either passed or I am going to pass this year. But there's another area that I'm also interested in, and this has to do because of my experience in Hurricane Sandy. When I went back to run that marathon, I think it was in 2012, half of Manhattan was underwater. And there were things like hospitals were in trouble because they had a generator in the basement that was supposed to provide emergency electricity. Well, it was flooded. And even if it wasn't flooded, it would have been hard to get those fuel trucks there to keep fueling those diesel powered generators. So I got interested. I've always been interested in renewable energy. And there's these things called microgrids. And basically what it is you use solar panels with a battery backup. And they can be used as backup electricity when the grid is down, say, because of a natural disaster or something. But it also, when the sun is shining and things are fine, they can generate electricity and help green up our whole electric grid. My bill, HB 1249, is looking at microgrids, but there's already several microgrid roadmaps out there. Mine is taking a different position. And we have to sit back and look strategically at what's going on. And there's two things that it does. It's looking at grid resiliency. And by resiliency, I mean, like if there's a wildfire, your electric transmission line gets cut off, many people still need power. So that's what resiliency is resiliency to a disaster. But there's also something called reliability. Like, I'm sure, how many of you have ever had the lights go off and it's not a natural disaster? Everybody, right? Okay, that's reliability. And I call it things like tree limbs and squirrels. So, so my bill is looking at grid resiliency and grid reliability, or I call, wildfires to squirrels. And what it's doing is it's saying, okay, let's be really strategic about this. What are those critical facilities that need to keep up all the time, when there is a disaster or a squirrel? And people think of like hospitals. But what I learned from Hurricane Sandy is grocery stores and pharmacies also matter too. And so this bill is looking at doing this conversation with people, communities around the state. What are those critical facilities? In some rural areas, it's a senior center or the school. That's where people gather. The other thing that this does from a strategic standpoint is look at what are those critical areas of Colorado that either are susceptible to a natural disaster like a wildfire, or they just do not have reliable electricity. And I found out just the other day, there's areas in Denver that do not have reliable electricity. So given those things, resiliency, reliability, critical facilities and critical areas, take that stuff, take the learning we've already done on microgrids and figure out a roadmap. What are the things that we need to learn what we can learn, what are the barriers to make, deploying more microgrids. What are the rules that we want to apply across the state? And how do we foster them? What kind of financial mechanisms are there? Because we all have limited money, to do this. So how can we do it in a very smart way? That's my bill. And I'll just stop there. I guess it's 4:22. I get talking too much. So I can stay on for a little bit and answer questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Maya. I think we've met. I went to Niwot High School, and I know you're nearby. So I think I read when looking into this bill a little bit that it is potentially, I think the term was like technology agnostic, meaning that like these microgrids might be fueled by different means. And I know that for us, like something that's really important is that going forward, we're investing a lot in renewable energy. So what's the plan for making that kind of central to your bill?
I am so glad you asked it. And Maya, you said Niwot High School? Okay, I'm running for re-election and I'm going to be, I pick up Niwot next year. So I'm like totally excited. My kids went to Niwot, so I just had to say that too. I'm so glad you brought that up because there are other things other than like solar and storage. There could be wind and storage. There could be, I don't know, there could be technologies you don't know about. I'm learning about green hydrogen. I'm learning about all these different things that can be. But the other key thing is that they're already, a microgrid right now can be defined as something that just provides, it could involve fossil fuels. And there are a lot of, backup generators right now that, some people could call their microgrid. But what you can do with renewables is extend the resiliency of that system by not only having that backup generator, but also a microgrid as well. In the bill, you'll notice that it does say that we want to, how will it help us meet our greenhouse gas emissions goals? And how will it support beneficial electrification, which is basically using, no fossil fuels in a building. So it's in there. And that's my lean toward that. But I wanted to make sure that we have a robust conversation about it first. If it were up to me, it'd be completely renewables, but I also know what will sell. And what can sell is if it's a microgrid that already has that fossil fuel diesel generator in there, but you expand its capacity by using renewables. So it's, part of it is a little bit of politics to make sure it gets passed. Does that make sense? Okay. Another question? Okay. And, I'm going to follow up on that a little bit more. Colorado is different from California. I think California has really gone forward like gung-ho renewables and all that. We have to be much more careful here. We're still a purple state, and we have to be very careful about how we make this transition. And I know what can pass and what doesn't pass. I'm working on a bill right now that is on building codes. And it's saying it's not banning gas, it's just making it a little bit more difficult to have gas in your house. So this is really the way you kind of do the sausage making. Okay. Other questions? It can be anything.
There's one in the chat. Thank you, Kian, or Kaylee, I'm sorry. Yeah. Is there anything we can do to limit our demand on cars, even if they are electric?
Limit the demand on cars. Well, you can ride your bike. There was a big transportation bill that was passed last year that had to do with multimodal transportation. I think some of it is, I kind of look at this kind of stuff is how can we be, it takes thinking differently. When I grew up, we didn't recycle. Now, like just about everybody does. So it's just thinking a little bit differently. limit the demand on cars. Yeah, I think we can't keep on building more and more lanes of traffic. We've got to think about more, how we can do things differently. So maybe it's like when you decide to live in a certain place, look at the public transportation that's nearby. Is it bikeable? Think outside of just that nice place you want to live, but does it fit with other things? So I guess that would be my suggestion. Okay. Yeah. Infrastructure manufacturing is still very bad. Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So go ahead.
We had your email, Tracy, and I just wanted to confirm that if folks still had questions to ask, that they could just reach out and keep that conversation going.
And I'm gonna do something more. I'm gonna give you my direct email. How's that?
Oh, awesome. Thank
That's
you.
right to me. I mean, my staff looks at it, but this one doesn't have a delay. So if you have any other question, I'll tell you, I drop everything to talk to younger people, because I think you are such an important voice. And especially when it comes to climate change, I think so many, I don't call it climate change, the climate crisis. It's so important to keep this in people's faces. It's hurting us everywhere, here and now. It's affecting everybody, and especially people who are disproportionately impacted. So you need to keep the pressure on, because it's so easy to go, well, what's my gas going to cost tomorrow? That matters more than this. This trumps everything. Climate crisis trumps everything. So keep that voice going. Okay.
Can we give a round of applause to Tracy, or at least a visual one? Yes.
I hope to see you at the Capitol for HB 1249. That'd be great. I'm also 2 other really great environmental bills at 350 Colorado we'll tell you about too. So come and testify.
Yes.
Okay. And Maya, I hope to see you. I run over the Niwot track, so I hope to see you sometime. Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
Hi, Tracy, thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will hand it over to our amazing Phoebe. Come here.
All right, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm not sure if she's still on or not, but that was awesome. It was lovely to have her. So going back into just a quick overview of what is Yak, our affectionate name for the Youth Action Committee. The Youth Action Committee was started in 2020 as a part of 350 Colorado, which was started by me and our old co-chair, who no longer is working with us, but she is still in the climate movement, but she went to college and wasn't in Colorado anymore. But we are a group of youth who put on events like this. We did one last year too, so I guess it's annual now. But we work to create a place for youth activists, and plan youth-centered events and build a community based on learning. I'm very pro-learning, and I think that learning is a gift. And I think that for us to do better and be always engaged, working with the idea of questions and learning is always important. So we're working to create a youth space. We work within the Movement Building Committee. We meet on the fourth Monday of every month from 6 to 7. So if you want to learn more about Yak, you can go to our website and look at Youth Opportunity page. Also, there'll be more information about it in your toolkit, which you'll get tomorrow. So we've been talking about 350 Colorado. You might be familiar with us, but we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on building our grassroots movements. And we work to fight for a sustainable future in Colorado. We work together our main pillars are to create climate solutions, give a just and equitable transition in Colorado, and build a fossil-free future for everyone, and build a livable climate for everyone. We are also the largest grassroots climate action group in Colorado. So that's a pretty brief overview of who we are. For more information about that, you can go to our website, or you have more in your toolkit. So we are going to quiz you now. Don't worry, it's not going to be anything hard. Yeah, but we want to see how much you know so that we can learn more and reflect on what we learned. So yeah, I'll pass it to Charlia.
Hi guys. Yeah, like we said, it's not super tricky. It's just sort of like to try and make it stick a little better. So our first question, this is a true or false question. Lobbying is the act of lawfully attempting to influence the actions, policies, or decisions of government officials. And we have the poll out right now, so just choose whichever answer seems more correct and submit. Then once everybody has their answers in, we will share the results. And the answer to that one was true. Wow, you guys are smart. Good one. All right. This next one is kind of tricky. How much did Colorado spend on lobbying in the 2020-2021 fiscal year? It's a pretty high number. That's the only hint I'm going to give you.
I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea.
This one isn't super important. I just thought it would be kind of fun. $44 million in one legislative cycle. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. It's up there for sure. Okay. Who is responsible for completing the final step of approving a bill? It's okay.
Sorry, y'all. It's hard to do both of these at the same time.
You're fine,
one
Contessa.
saw.
I
No
really
one
appreciate
saw.
your help.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully no one saw the answer.
You're the best. Phoebe. I wish.
Yeah, we get so much done.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that is the governor. Dang. Nice one, guys. Okay. How many bills got passed in Colorado's legislative session last year? This one, also pretty hefty number, but definitely not as big. I think the nationwide, like across the United States, it was like 10,000 every year, which is pretty big. We're only accountable for a small portion of that. Yep, 500. Looks like that still got majority. Nice. Okay, this is another true or false. Climate change presents a unique demand for innovative policy decisions. I think we can use what we learned from Tracy. Yep. And climate change disproportionately impacts these groups. So you can choose any of them or all of them, up to you. Yeah, and like we discussed earlier, it disproportionately impacts people of color, youth, elderly, and indigenous people. And finally, what role do all of us play in the legislative process? Constituents, very nice. And this is a personalized question. Just wondering what the most intimidating aspect of lobbying is for you guys, so we can work to try and break down those barriers. So it looks like we've got a decent amount speaking with legislators. Reading bills and understanding language, yeah, they can get super wordy.
Yeah.
Being persuasive. I definitely relate to speaking with legislators and scheduling meetings. That always seems really like professional and intimidating to me. But we're all a team, so we'll figure it out together.
That's why you're here.
Exactly.
Woo.
Okay, it looks like that was it. So I'll pass it off to whoever slide this is.
Hi guys. So I'm going to talk about a bill to a law. On this slide, we just have the simple steps, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. So a lot of this, what we're doing today, obviously we're learning how to lobby. So it's important to know what we're lobbying on specifically. So we're lobbying on laws. So how does a bill become a law in the first place? So our first step is an idea is developed and the bill is drafted. So when an idea is developed, a legislator chooses to sponsor a bill. And then there can be co-sponsors too as well. And then the bill is drafted and put into actual proper technical form. And then it's introduced. So it's usually introduced into that the sponsor's chamber, and then it's read at its first reading. So after the first reading, the bill is usually assigned to a committee. And then the committee takes action, and then a bill is scheduled for its first hearing. So the committee then sends the bill back to the House of Origin. So like we say here in the step 2, hearings usually take place. There's 3 of them, and then there's voting to move it on. And then after this hearing, the bill moves to the other house. So for example, if it started in the House of Representatives, it would move to the Senate. So the bill moves to the other house, and then it's also heard 3 times, and then it's voted on as well. If it passes, it'll be sent back to the House of Origin. And then basically by then, everyone agrees that it's a solid bill to send to the governor. But before that, at all these hearings, they decide amendments to make. So then amendments are made, and then there's a final vote. So once the amendments are made, I'll answer that in a second. Once amendments are made, it's sent to the governor, and the governor can either choose to sign it or veto it. If it's vetoed, it's usually sent back, and there has to be a majority vote. And if it's a majority vote, then it's overturned and it still passes. But if there's not a majority vote, then it dies. Throughout this process, there's multiple times it can die. So these steps laid out here are when it goes through a perfect transition, and it goes through all the steps perfectly. So it's read 3 times basically. So it's basically to like get a understanding of it. By my understanding of it, it's read 3 times to get a solid understanding of the workings of it. Since it's a law that is being implemented obviously in our states and then our federal government at that level too, it's really important that the legislators can know exactly where the amendments need to be made so it can be a solid bill and a solid law. So yeah, so these steps basically lay out the perfect plan of what exactly would happen if it went well. But like I said, there's multiple times it can die. The most likely chance it will die is like when we think of a bill dying, it's most likely to happen when the governor chooses to sign it or not. But yeah, that's how a bill goes from a bill to a law.
It looks like I got a quick question. Quinn asking, is there an average length this process takes, or does it vary depending on each bill?
It usually, by what I understand, it usually varies, but it takes a couple of months.
There's also a lot more information about this that goes more into detail in your toolkit, and you'll get that tomorrow. So look out for that.
Okay, cool. So obviously we all have a little bit of an idea of what lobbying is now at this point. But I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth. So just going off of what Madeline was talking about in terms of the timeline of how a bill becomes a law, right now we're kind of in between step 1 and step 2. So a lot of these bills have been introduced by senators, representatives like Tracy Burnett, who just spoke with us. And now it's kind of up to us, like citizens and different lobby groups and organizations like 350 Colorado and nonprofits with ideas about which bills they want to support for whatever reason. It's up to us to make sure that legislators hear about the bills before they go into those committees and vote whether they want to support it or not. This is largely just important because it makes sure that the representatives, the senators, have heard about the bill and know that it's important to their constituents. So who does lobbying? It can really be anyone, citizens, nonprofits, corporations, industries, anyone with an agenda that they want legislators to support for whatever reason. So a lot of the times you'll hear about big lobby groups for the fossil fuel industry, and that's a lot of the reason that we still have our governments supporting the fossil fuel industry, is because fossil fuel industries recognize just how powerful lobbying is. And so they'll put a lot of money into really convincing people to go speak with big legislators and representatives high up and make sure that they continue supporting fossil fuels. So we kind of have to do the same thing, but in the opposite direction. And unfortunately, because we don't have millions and trillions of dollars to just spend on campaigns like this, we have to use what we have, which is our voices and our numbers. So that's why it's really important to have people like us, especially youth, show up and make sure that legislators hear the other side of the story, which is much more representative of what everybody, what everyday citizens need and want. So what it is, again, it's just meeting with your representative or a politician. This can be online or in person, and it can be basically like a group of youth or a group of whoever you're organizing with. And oftentimes you'll kind of go with like a few bills in mind of what you want to make sure the legislator takes away from the meeting. They oftentimes don't have a ton of time because they're busy people. They have a lot to do, they have a lot on their mind, and so you want to make that information really accessible, which I'm sure Phoebe's going to talk about a little bit more coming up here soon. So again, the why in lobbying is really to influence politicians' actions and their votes ultimately, because that's what determines whether a bill becomes a law or whether it dies in committee. So yeah, in terms of climate action, this is a huge, powerful tool that is largely untapped into by a lot of youth, unfortunately, which is why we're trying to really build a movement of people who like make it accessible, because it's really, when you think about it, it's actually just like having a conversation to convince somebody of something. When we had Representative Burnett come in here just briefly, we see that she's just a person, right? Like she's just another person, and we want to dismantle this feeling that it's insurmountable to talk to your representatives, because ultimately they're there to represent you, and they can only do that if you are making your voice heard to them. So yeah, I will pass it on to the next slide.
All right, so why is climate advocacy so important right now? As we all know and have seen, climate change is happening before our very eyes. Its effects can be seen every single day. Natural disasters are happening more frequently and more intensely. Human health is being impacted both mentally and physically. Natural ecosystems are dying, and the weather is just becoming more extreme. It's getting hotter and hotter, it feels like. And when you put it that way, it may sound hopeless, but with climate advocacy and lobbying, we have the power to actually make a difference. The effects of climate change are happening before our very eyes, but by advocating for stronger climate policy, we can fight to make a difference before it's too late, before the effects of climate change become irreversible. And for young people, our voices matter most of all. I mean, we're the future, and our generation will be impacted by climate change more than any generation before us. We've already been hit the hardest by climate change more than any other generation, just because it is getting worse and worse. We've heard phrases such as global warming, sea level rise, and climate change for our entire lives, and that can be really challenging and scary to grow up hearing those things constantly. But as the next generation, it's essential that we let our voices be heard in conversations about climate action, because what we do now is going to affect everything moving forward. Time and time again, young people have demonstrated that we have the power to change the world for the better. You have so much power to make a difference and change your future for the better for our generation and for all of the generations to follow.
Thank you, all of you. Awesome. Great jobs. Yeah, so let's get into it. How do we lobby? That's the real question. We've learned what it is and how we do it and why it's important. Now it's time to learn how to do it. So how the process works is what I'm going to do in my amount of time that I have is I'm going to tell you guys how the process works, how you meet with your legislator, how to set that up. Then I'm going to give you just some basic things to always follow when you're meeting with your legislator. Then I'm just going to give you tips and tricks and all that. And then I'm going to, wrap it up. So you're going to find your legislator. I believe, Chelsea, can you put that in the chat? So whether you want to lobby your legislator, your senators, whichever you choose, or if you want to choose multiple of them, you'll go to the website, you'll find out who there are. And once you know who there are, it's pretty easy to access their email, their PO address, their phone number. So we found that the most effective way to meet with your legislator is to call them and email them. I know that we all hate being on the phone, or at least I do. And most of the time you kind of will get a voicemail. For example, last year when I was lobbying, I had to call them 3 times and email them multiple times for them to get my meeting. It can feel very daunting, and you kind of have to be persistent because, let's be real, they're very busy, especially in the session. And we want to make sure that they're making time for their constituents, and they have time for that. So make sure that you're using that. So we have in your toolkit that you'll get tomorrow, you'll have a sample email script and a sample phone script. You can use that. I would at least follow that loosely. You'll want to tell them who you are, your name, your age, where you live, that you're a constituent. Make sure that you tell them that you're a constituent and not a lobbyist, because anyone who's a lobbyist must be registered, even if you are a volunteer lobbyist. And you must reiterate that you're not on behalf of any organization, because you're there as a concerned constituent and not a lobbyist. It's a whole another thing. So make sure that you tell them all of that, and then what bills you're going to be talking to them about. So that needs to be by bill number if they have one, so that because these legislators track them by their number, so it's easier for them to identify if you tell them the bill number and the name. And then times that you and your group are available. And yeah, just follow the script or follow both of them. So make sure that you're being persistent. Once you and your group, how hopefully you're going to be lobbying in the next month, is you'll get a group. You'll be paired with other youth in your district, if there are any. If you don't have a group or are not connected with anyone in your that you want to lobby with or know that you can lobby with, let us know. We'll find you a group A, or some of our organizers will be willing to volunteer and lobby with you. So once you contact your group and talk with your group and find your group and what times you're available in the next couple weeks. Again, we are calling this lobby week, but it's really, we call it more of lobby month in reality, because it's kind of hard to schedule a meeting with a legislator when you only have 1 week. So make sure that you're giving them at least 2 weeks of slot times, so that they can find the best time for them and for you guys to lobby. So once you get there, once you are on the day of, make sure that you're being professional and very polite and respectful. Again, we want to make sure that we're being seen in a respectful light for both sides. Also trying to dress more professional can be on your side, especially for youth. Sometimes we're seen as a little less professional than adults, especially since some of us can't vote. So make sure that you're being respectful, but that doesn't mean that you can't be frank with them. Again, like Tracy said, they want to know why it's important to you guys. They want to know your story and why it's important instead of learning more about the bill. Yes, tell them about the bill, but really tell them more about why it's important to you. Try and make it personal, because you're their constituent, and they kind of have to follow what their constituents want, even if it's not, or at least good legislators do this, even if it's not their personal or what they would vote originally. When people talk to them in their district, it's important to them. They want to be a good ally and a good representative of their district. So make sure that you are telling them that. You're calling on them to be your ally, and that's what they're supposed to do. So try and make it personal. Try and use your story of self, which we'll learn more about in breakout groups later. And make sure that you're being truthful. If you don't know an answer to a question, say, I don't know the answer to that. And then you can ask, when they ask you questions, say that, and then tell them that you'll find out and get back to you. You want to make sure that you are trying to build a relationship with your legislator. We talked about, really, they want to have a conversation with you. They want to know about you and less about the bill. Yes, tell them about the bill, like I said, but try and focus on your story and yourself. You want to have a conversation with them. It's important that we're building relationships. Like me, I'm excited for my meeting because I've met with them before, and I'm excited to see how they're doing and have a conversation with them again. So make sure before you leave, you're giving them a bold ask. Like I said, I'm going to repeat this many times in this little section. Be frank with them. Get straight to the point. It's important. If you're dilly-dallying around the answer, nothing's going to happen. Be frank with them. Be personal and be frank with them, because they want to know. Give them a bold ask, which we call in the community that a bold ask is a frank question that gets straight to the point. So that's like, can I ask you how you'll be voting on this? Sometimes they'll say, I don't know yet, which is fine, but ask them to try and follow up with them and ask them after a little bit of time. Like I said, make sure that you're following up with them. We have fact sheets for all the bills that we're going to be talking about and focusing on for this week. But again, like, you don't have to follow those, but we would love it if you would lobby with those bills for us, because there are so many pieces of legislation. Like we said, there are hopefully going to be like 500 on average passing every year. So we aren't able to cover them all. And yes, fact sheets, they're so easy and really nice. And we have a bunch of people who made one. So make sure that you're using, I'm sure that you can find them. We also have we had another training and they have fact sheets for all those. So we'll be sharing a bunch of information afterward, like everything that you could need that we can supply you with. So continue with your bold ask. So I covered being respectful, polite, making sure that you're personal with them. Make sure that you're being kind and being respectful, being professional, because that's a big one. We kind of need that. And again, don't be scared. It's not that scary, actually. I mean, we're all kind of scared of it, and it is pretty scary the first time that you do it, but I look back at the first time I did it and it went really well. And I think that I got this training and had the correct training. Now you're getting that training and you'll be prepared. So don't worry about that. We believe in you guys. So if you have any other questions on this, I'm sure that I forgot a couple things, but in your toolkit, like I said, it's going to cover way more than I covered. And then, yeah, be looking out for that toolkit tomorrow. We'll be sharing that with other information about next steps. Yeah, so I'm passing it to Maya. We're going to learn about bills now.
So sorry to jump in. I'm going to be doing this bill. Sorry, Maya, but Maya will be amazing at the next two. So I'm presenting on SB 22138 to reduce Colorado greenhouse gas emissions. And this really cute picture of goats is an example of agrovoltaics, which is one of the big parts of the bill. Agrovoltaics is the simultaneous use of agricultural land for solar panels and agriculture. So it's a really exciting idea. And they can both be symbiotic, and so you can be getting solar power and also growing like food. And so it's awesome. But yes, next slide, please. So this bill does a ton of different things that aren't super related to each other, except that they all have the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado. So it's trying to solve a lot of different problems in Colorado at once. So one problem is that the US insurance industry is invested in the climate crisis. They've recently come under fire for failing to act on climate change, and they're continuing to invest their assets in fossil fuel companies. They're continuing to insure fossil fuel companies because fossil fuel companies can't operate without insurance, and the insurance companies are just freely giving away insurance to these companies. Meanwhile, these same insurance companies are pulling away insurance or refusing insurance for people living in high-risk areas. So the insurance industry is not acting on climate and not protecting people from climate impacts. And then we also have Colorado's pension fund, PARA. So when you retire, if you work with the state, you get a retirement fund, and that fund is invested in a lot of different places. And it was recently discovered that Colorado's pension fund has over $2 billion invested in fossil fuel companies. We've been trying to get them to act on this. We've been trying to get them to pull their money out of fossil fuel companies, and they don't want to. So that's another problem. A third problem is that Colorado has greenhouse gas reduction targets, but they don't have the accountability mechanisms or the midway interim targets that they need to really be effective. Like we have these awesome goals, but then if there aren't like steps to take to get to those goals, then the goals are just words and they're not like actually going to happen. So we need some accountability with those goals. And then we have, a massive untapped potential with carbon sequestration, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere back into the ground, and also agrovoltaics, which you saw that picture of. And those both have huge untapped potential to offset or reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado. And so the bill addresses all of this stuff. So it will first force insurance companies and also PARA to publish climate risk assessments that will then be made public. So if the public has access to these climate risk assessments, then they can go to PARA and insurance companies and say like, hey, you published this climate risk. What are you doing about this risk that you just published? So it'll create a lot of public pressure that way. It also establishes intermediate subsidiary greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2028 and 2040. So 40% reduction, 75% reduction respectively, just to keep our goals on track and make sure we're staying on track, because we like to procrastinate, which, you know, I like to procrastinate, but I don't like it when our state procrastinates on greenhouse gas reduction. So another thing that it does is phase out small off-road gas engines, like lawnmowers and leaf blowers in ozone non-attainment areas, with financial incentives to do so. There's also oversight of dry and abandoned wells that will be used for greenhouse gas sequestration by the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So basically, they'll just be overseeing this process and making sure that it actually happens. But one of the biggest parts of the bill, and the parts that a lot of people are the most excited about, I mean, a lot of parts are exciting, but it creates funds for the study of carbon sequestration in agriculture. Agriculture and, you know, soil, like if we bring our soil alive, the soil will capture carbon from the atmosphere and put it into the soil. And so there's a huge untapped potential for carbon sequestration just from having more regenerative agriculture processes. And then I just recently read a study that said that if just 1% of arable land was dedicated to producing solar energy, it would be possible to offset the world's energy demand. So if we use 1% of our agricultural land and put solar panels on it, that is enough to offset the world's energy demand. So a lot of stuff in this bill. The bill was introduced and it's set for a committee hearing on Tuesday, March 8th. So just this Tuesday at 2 p.m. You can submit written testimony. I'll put a toolkit in the chat where you can see like talking points. It's a fact sheet and you can have instructions on exactly how to give testimony. You can submit written testimony. You can speak at a hearing. It's up to you, but I hope we can get a lot of support on this bill, and I will pass it to Maya to talk about the next two bills.
Thanks, Giselle. That one is super exciting, so it's always fun to hear about it. One thing I love about lobbying in general is just that like it's very solution oriented. You're looking at the bills that are proposed at the governmental level that are literally trying to fix the problems that we are facing. So it's very exciting. This next one is HB 22-1249, and we already heard a little bit about it from Representative Tracy Burnett. She's one of the sponsors along with Senator Rankin and Representative Houghton. So it's called the Microgrid Roadmap Act. And as Tracy went into a little bit earlier, essentially, the problem that we're facing right now is that climate change related disasters are increasing grid disruption, meaning like wildfires and flooding and just bigger storms in general. And therefore grid resilience, the backup electrical power when the grid is down, and the grid reliability, which is the consistent delivery of electrical power, they must be improved to account for that. Right now, Colorado doesn't really have a strategic plan for doing so. And so this bill kind of proposes a way to outline a roadmap to get to the point where we have a grid that is both resilient and reliable. The bill proposes a roadmap by 2025 that different organizations like the Air Quality Control Commission in Colorado would work to develop. So to do that, they would hold community stakeholder meetings, which would be run by the Colorado Energy Office, the Department of Local Affairs, and the Colorado Resiliency Office, essentially just to hear what community members have to say about these microgrids so that community members can share if they have microgrids and just to essentially have that representation heard in hearings. So the idea is to tap into microgrids that are developed by individuals, neighborhoods, and communities in order to reinforce the electrical grid that we all would just basically give a good back goes wrong due to natural disasters or just in general reduced power outages. So right now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the bill is inclusive of all technologies, which means that, as Representative Burnett mentioned, like fossil fuel based technologies could be used for these microgrids. That is a huge point of concern. I see it in this bill. And so I think that when we are lobbying, we want to really emphasize that we want renewable energy microgrids, not just microgrids coming from whatever kind of energy that might not be sustainable and might continue contributing to the climate crisis. So this bill does prioritize high-risk communities, meaning communities that are situated in areas that are likely to be faced with the natural disasters. And it also improves consumer choice and reduces energy costs by kind of spreading out where we get our energy rather than making us all rely only on like big corporations for our energy. And basically the bill would support the development of microgrids legislatively, financially, and technologically, meaning that part of this roadmap would outline how to most effectively do that. Okay, we can go into the next slide. Okay, so this one is HB 22-1244, and it's called the Public Protections from Toxic Air Contaminants. The sponsors are Senator Gonzalez, Representatives Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Kennedy. So right now, Colorado has a massive air quality crisis. Every year we are hitting huge levels of ozone non-attainment, as well as air quality grades. They always grade the air quality. And right now we've multiple times come back with like F level or failing level air quality. So all that to say that Colorado has very poor air quality. This is exacerbated by climate change and wildfire season. I'm sure that all of you have noticed like days in the summer when you look outside and just see smog or smoke, and you feel like even though you'd love to go climb a mountain, even if you did, you wouldn't see anything because it's all smoky. And I know that can weigh both like emotionally, mentally, and also physically because it is very unhealthy to breathe in that air. Poor air quality actually increases the risk of cancers and brain damage and birth defects and infertility, asthma, and heart problems. So these are all huge health impacts that can be totally reduced, if not eradicated, by addressing the air quality crisis that we have right now. So fossil fuel production and fossil fuel production and use pumps toxins into the air, which disproportionately impacts communities of color. So this is also an environmental justice issue. And right now there is no state level air toxics program to protect Coloradans and our environment. So this bill essentially directs the Air Quality Control Commission to establish a list of high-risk toxic air contaminants and toxic air toxic air contaminants, which would be basically based off of science, and it directs the Air Quality Control Commission to set the science-based protective targets for both short-term, also known as acute, and long-term, known as chronic exposure to these air toxins. It would also require annual emissions and an annual emissions inventory report from all major and synthetic minor sources of greenhouse gases and of toxic air pollutants. The big thing in this bill, as I see it, is the monitoring program that it would establish, because right now we don't really have air monitors to show us what we're breathing. And through this monitoring program, 6 long-term monitoring sites would be established across Colorado. And these give us a huge wealth of information that can support more aggressive climate action to reduce fossil fuel use because it will show that the levels of toxic chemicals such as benzene in the air, benzene's a carcinogenic result of fracking, for example. It will basically show these things are higher around fossil fuel production, and that will cause or like form the base for following legislation to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and ultimately improve our air quality. And finally, the bill would also require an annual reporting to the General Assembly by November of 2025, just so that everybody in the General Assembly is aware of the state of our air quality. So, yep, that's that bill. So I think I was going to explain this. Is that right?
Yeah, you can totally explain that.
Okay, cool. So we are going to be going into some breakout rooms coming up here. And we have two really exciting topics to choose from. So one of them is learning about the story of self that Phoebe mentioned a little bit earlier. Story of self is essentially like learning how to use your personal experiences to be convincing in lobbying, as well as just in talking to people about climate change in general. And then another breakout room will be lobbying practice. If you're feeling really hyped about everything that you've heard about today, but feel like you need a little bit of practice and time to give it a try before you actually go speak with your legislator, then definitely go to that room to kind of, you're going to be doing some role play. So yeah, how about, should we just have people, I think we're going to open up the breakout room for story of self, so you can join that if you want to. And then if you're interested in the lobbying practice, we're just going to have you stay in this main room. Correct me if I'm wrong on those logistics, and we can also have people like drop whatever they're interested in the chat if that's easier.
I was gonna say, I think, do people see the prompt to join that other breakout room for story of self?
It should be on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and it looks like people are joining that story of self breakout room. So I think that it's
Cool.
and I'll stop sharing the screen so that this is our own little breakout room here for lobbying practice.
Okay, cool.
And if anyone wants to join story of self but can't figure it out, I can assign you to the room as well. Caroline, did you want me to assign you, or did you want to stay in the lobbying practice one?
I'm with Maya. I'm in this room.
Okay, I just want to make sure I saw you raise your hand, so I wasn't sure.
Cool.
I think that we're good.
Looks like we're all organized here, but we're gonna do it anyway, and it's gonna be fun.
I'm gonna pause.
I think everyone's back. We have a couple more people too. So will you screen share, Katessa?
I think the next slide is just a recap. So
Oh yeah, we can, yeah, you're right.
yeah, I don't know if we want to just focus on Representative Orlick right now.
Yeah, all right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Yeah, so I just wanted to go over other ways to get involved, what next steps are, and then also introducing our special guest. Yeah, we're going to be going into a Q&A, so like just any questions you have, feel free to ask them now. We also have Representative Meg Froelich. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Yeah, so she'll be here to answer questions if you guys have any more. It's awesome that we get to hear from multiple people in the legislative area. So yeah, you guys heard a little bit about Yak, and I'm gonna just reiterate that again as the end. So Yak, like we said, was the Youth Action Committee. We meet as part of the Movement Building Committee. We have our first meeting back. We took a break to try and like reflect and like, what do we want our committee to look like? And so we're going back in this month. So we'll be starting on March 23rd. right? That's right, Chelsea. At 6 to 7. We would love to see any of you there. But we work as part of the Movement Building Committee. So yeah, we have, for any more information, there's going to be more info that in your toolkit, which you'll get tomorrow. We want to give our organizers a little bit more time to work on that because we were a little stressed about that. Yes, thank you, Chelsea. And then we also have a lot of other youth opportunities going around in 350 Colorado, which is super exciting. Mason, who you heard a little earlier in the presentation, she is hosting like a research for her research. She's a grad student at DU, and she's hosting research on how climate change is affecting youth's mental health. So anyone who's 20 years and younger can sign up for that. All of this information will be in your toolkit again. So like for any links or anything that I'm talking about, just look in there tomorrow. And then we're also working on the Global Climate Day of Action that Greta Thunberg called to restart Fridays for Future on the 25th, which is coming up this month. So it's very exciting, and we're getting a group of youth together to organize action for that day. So if you're interested in that, you could email Maya, which is just Maya at 350colorado.org. And then, yeah, is that all? I'm trying to think about what it was. That's it, right? I think so. Yeah, very excited. So we're gonna be staying on for questions. So does anyone have any questions for us? I'm gonna let Representative introduce herself.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, if you want to. I'm like putting you on the spot. I'm like, go
thank
speak.
you for thank you for going through this training today. It's you, if any one of you showed up to speak to me at the Capitol, it would be the best day, because the people that I have to talk to normally are horrible. So I was telling the adults earlier, I mean, Excel has probably 20 lobbyists. Oil and gas has 30. You know, they ride the elevator with you. They follow you into the bathroom. They're paid to get a chance to let you know what they're thinking. So I would much rather know what young people are thinking. And I have sort of joke about 2 summers ago when we had our big protests outside the building on racial justice. My son's outside the building protesting while I'm inside trying to pass some legislation. And that was absolutely an example of outside the building pressure changing what we were doing inside the building, because we were going to leave without addressing police accountability. And we absolutely couldn't. And so that was fantastic. So you will make a difference. I hope you're not, you know, this climate change is just such a depressing and it really, you know, it's such a huge problem. And I think really the way to fight that depression and the feeling of powerlessness is to take action, and is to see where the power lies and see if you can press some levers and make some change in a positive way. So definitely figure out who your state rep is, who your state senator is. And then we said earlier on the call with the adult group, I guess, you know, kind of memorize the members of the Energy and Environment Committee. And if Chelsea was role playing conservative Republicans, I mean, when I used to be outside the building, I used to try and find one thing that I could connect with them on. You know, were they an animal lover, or were they a public school parent, or was there just one thing that we could use to connect? So that's another really good strategy. Are there questions in the chat? No. The other thing I would just say, because you are young and gorgeous, you know, take care of yourselves. Like, don't let horrible rejection turn you from this work. I have two stories related to that. One is I was knocking on doors and, during the campaign, and this woman's dog was just going berserk. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she said, "Yeah, you need to get off my porch." So I said, "Oh, okay, I'm so sorry." So I turned to walk away, and I just paused to put in my notes, "Don't go here, crazy dog, ladies mean." And she like screamed and she said, "I think I said you need to get off my porch." And I was like, okay, so it's just like, man, I don't want to knock on any more doors today, right? I just want to head home. And I was like, okay, just go up and turn the corner. Anyway, I turned the corner and all of a sudden I hear, "Meg, what are you doing?" And I didn't even know this friend of mine lived on the next block. And she comes out and she's like, what do you need? You want some water? How many yard signs can you give me? So, there is a silver lining. The other thing that I will tell you that's embarrassing and funny, maybe funny, maybe not. I was asked to talk to an indivisible group, and a male senator, is pretty young, went before me, and he always is super slick, like really well prepared, and he gave a speech that I could almost give. I've heard him give it so many times. And I just thought, these are indivisible people. These are my people. They're not going to want to hear this same old stuff. So I tried to be a lot more casual, and I told them some stories, and I told them how I began and whatever. And the next day, the head of the indivisible group called me, and they were like, we don't think you're going to win. Like, you need to take some public speaking classes. Did you hear the guy that went before you? He was so much better than you. So anyway, don't be deterred if some conservative Republican old white guy is dismissive or doesn't listen, because the next person, it's going to hit home and it's going to change their mind. So do keep at it.
That was so good.
Thank you.
You have to be willing to be embarrassed. I guess that's a horrible lesson, but
There you go.
But thank you for today, for your work today, and I hope to see you in real life. Am I going to see people, Chelsea? Are they going to come to the Capitol?
If folks feel safe lobbying in person, they are 100% welcome. We were going to just do virtual to also capture.
Yeah, load me up with an email or
Yeah.
a phone call.
What?
A phone, it's like a thing that you dial.
I was just telling people that phone is a good way to get to people. And I was like, we hate talking on the phone, but it's effective.
And you're not going to get through. You're just going to leave a message. So
Yeah, of course.
Be persistent.
But I told the grown-ups, not the grown-ups, but the older people, whatever they are, earlier, that all of our offices have a log. We got this many emails on this topic. We got, this many for, this many against,
Wow.
with a preference for in actual constituents, because I'm running the abortion access bill. We're in committee on Wednesday. I get thousands of emails about whores and discos and I don't know what. But most of them aren't from my district.
Yeah.
So I could care less if somebody from Colorado Springs wants to.
What district are you?
I am I actually now my new district, I have a sliver of Denver, and then I'm just south of Denver. So I'm Englewood, Sheridan, and then a sliver of Denver and Cherry Hills, which is interesting to keep it real. But with a preference, obviously, for in-district communication is given more weight, but they're all counted up. So thank you. I'll leave you to it. Is that okay, Chelsea?
I just had one quick question, if that was okay with you.
Sure.
I think this kind of came up in the training earlier today too, with the older group, about if it makes sense to lobby to someone who's not your rep or senator, but they sit on a committee that is a key player to letting that bill go through.
Yes.
Not. So yeah, just want to confirm.
I think so. I think, like I said, get to know energy and environment, and the House has an Energy and Environment Committee. The Senate is more fragmented because they have an Energy Committee and they have an Ag Committee and they have Public Health, and you're never quite sure where a bill is going to go. So thank you to our speaker, Casey Becker, who envisioned an Energy and Environment Committee. So I think it's good to know who those folks are, and especially, doubly if you're also your rep. But we said it earlier, if it doesn't make it out of committee, and if it doesn't make it out of committee with a nice strong vote, it has a tougher road. And so you're absolutely able to say, this bill is coming before your committee and it's so important to me and my friends and my group I lobby for, which is a youth group of, and they love hearing from young people, even though they feel free to vote and dismiss them, but vote against them. But it, like I said, it makes our day. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause.
Oh yeah, living for it. Thanks, guys. Hope to see you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you so much for coming.
Sorry, my cat.
Does anyone else have any other questions? It could be like anything. Again, did I interrupt someone?
I was just gonna say, how are you doing today, Phoebe?
I'm fine. I like the snow. It's nice and snowy where I live. Yeah, I'm strategizing who of my siblings I can recruit to lobby with me. That's my current plan. Yeah. So if you have any questions, you can email me at youth@350colorado.org. Yeah, my door is always open if you have any questions. Yeah, that's my email. It's also on the website, so it's not that hard to find. Yeah, so email us. Hopefully I'll see some of you at the meeting on the 23rd. Yeah. And then again, this is recorded, so we'll be following up with the recording and it will be on our YouTube channel. And then you'll get your toolkit tomorrow with all that, basically everything that we said, except more. In there for any reference or